Let's begin.
Hey there, scary story fanatics. Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Some things never end, and some things are just beginning. Settle in for the origins of one strange organization with Doughboy420's The Unending.
I'm not exactly sure when ICARUS was formed. I came along after the facility was built, but before it was expanded by our new benefactors. We were already huge, but their funding just made things all the better to keep things locked up in here. My first assignment here was something small, a cursed ring that doomed whoever wore it to die within a fortnight of placing it on their finger. It took numerous lives before we acquired it. We ended up buying it from a yard sale after the death of its most recent owner. Some things are easy like that. Then again, some things are much, much more difficult. I remember our previous director before his passing last fall. He was a nice guy from what we knew of him, but he sure did have some dark stories to tell. He spun tales of the various objects and creatures our organization had obtained. A toad-like creature that would eat any organic material it was presented with. A sentient, floating eyeball. A single page of John Dee's spellbook. The undying, severed ear of a long-dead criminal. And various other objects that gave their possessor any number of otherworldly abilities, like being able to hear anything from a distance within 1 kilometer, as is the case of the ear, to being unseen and unheard wherever you burn the wax fingers of a pickled hand that smelled of urine. Strange objects indeed. However, despite all of the horrible and wondrous things housed within these walls, there were a few things that both intrigued me and terrified me more than anything else. One such tale came the day I asked him what started all this. What drove ICARUS to be created? He told me something I had never known about the amulet that was kept in the deepest reaches of the facility. I'd seen it before, a blood-red stone carved with near-perfect precision into an oval shape, minute angles etched into the curve of the stone, showing bits of bright red, while other angles were darker, almost black like ink. It was set within an ornate golden frame. Spirals and curves of gold held onto the gemstone like shimmering tentacles, fastening it to a heavy chain that shined with an untarnished golden glimmer. He told me it all started when he and a group of wealthy friends got together for a party back in the 50s. They were all 20-something and had just graduated college. They were just looking for something fun to do, to remember the moment as one of the best times of their lives. What they found really did make them remember the moment. So much, in fact, that they pooled their riches together to build this place, to keep this thing, and whatever other objects they could find, from falling into the wrong hands. as this amulet did that night. There were 7 of them: Joey, Judah, Merideth, Anne, Frank, Edward, and Isaac, our director. They had graduated from a university in Europe that he didn't name, and from there, they decided to go from town to various local pubs to mark the occasion. They were a few pubs in and nearly sloshed, on their way to another, when they were quickly sobered up by a bright flash that lit up the night, as if it were daylight, showing the vibrant greens and browns of the trees and illuminating the wildlife in the forest, which then ran in terror at the sudden spark of light. The flash was not lightning because it came without a sound, and it lasted far too long to be the discharge of electricity in the air. For several seconds, the wilderness around them was like daylight, and they could not immediately tell where the light had originated. Their first thought was that they had witnessed a far-off nuclear attack, as were the fears of the time around the world, but it wasn't that at all. There was no sound. There was no shaking of the earth, no shockwave. There was only light, which then faded once more into darkness, as if the sun was rapidly setting, allowing the light to transition to dark once more. The lot of them were terrified, questions and accusations ringing out in the 2 cars that the group had traveled in, but none of them were correct, and nothing could have prepared them for what they would see. After the light had once again faded into the black of night, a few members of the party pointed out the flickering lights in the forest that had not been there mere moments before the flash. Lights like candles flickering in the night, stretching into the sky with several spires that stood out, silhouetted by the light of the moon. There was a structure out in the forest that was not there before. Both Merideth and Judah had been looking out the window in that very direction when the flash appeared, and they were sure that they were looking into empty wilderness before a great structure was suddenly there. They did not know what they were looking at, but they would soon get a closer look as the road twisted around to run alongside where this structure stood. The 2 cars had decided to just drive by this place and continue on to the next town, but whatever this place was, it had different plans. The 2 vehicles stalled out and came to a slow stop as they attempted to pass, leaving them stranded there, while the cars refused to start again. They were all panicked, not knowing what to do or how to react, but it was Frank that exited the vehicle first, at the great argument of everyone else. He got out of the car and walked over toward a row of trees that lay uprooted beside the road. They looked around to find that the trees all around the structure were on their sides, while others were sticking out from around the foundation of the building and the fence around it, the rest of them crushed beneath it. They looked up from the ground to find large walls stretching around the structure with a massive wrought iron gate at its center that led into a courtyard with a fountain with running water spitting out of the mouths of gargoyles, and beyond that was the structure itself. A great castle of immeasurable stonework and architecture made the darkened stone held together perfectly with a discolored, reddish-brown mortar, like coagulated blood that bound one stone to the next. Several towers sprouted from the castle's core and stretched into the sky with firelight in its many windows. The building was massive and ominous, as it definitely had an aura about it, an aura of extreme malice and evil intent that made everyone's hair stand on end as they felt the electricity of darkness lingering in the air.
What's that?
Frank asked quietly. Hear what? Joey asked. Frank did not answer. He simply began walking forward toward the castle beyond the fence and the wrought iron of the gate, creaking to allow him passage inside. What the heck are you doing? Judah asked him, but Frank did not answer. Before anyone could stop him, he began sprinting full speed toward the structure ahead. The others gave chase, but they could not catch up to him. He was too far ahead, and before they knew it, they were all inside the building. The large wooden door closing behind them. They immediately attempted to open the door, but it was shut tight, and they could not get it to move. Several of them began to panic, knowing that something was very wrong, which was made further evident when the door to the outside fell away into dust right before their eyes, the dust turning into insects and spiders that scurried away along the walls and floor. Anne and Merideth screamed as the boys stomped on anything that came close, squishing them beneath their feet. What the hell is going on? Judah said with a change in demeanor. He was a very proper, religious person, despite what most would think, due to his accent. He usually made every attempt to keep from cursing, saying heck and fudge as much as possible, so for him to say anything beyond that was out of character for him, and he was terrified of the consequences of entering this place. What is this place? Where are we? Joey said in a panic.
It just appeared out of nowhere.
Isaac spoke, completely confused by it all. Where'd Frank go? Edward asked, as he looked around the vast entryway of the castle. The place was dark, very dimly lit by torches that clung to either side of giant black stone pillars, each of them lined with various glyphs and unknown images inlaid with gold and shimmering in the torchlight. Massive doors stood, lining the room, leading off into various other parts of the castle. Most of them were closed, while some of them were open a crack, or even wide open, revealing long, extending hallways and rooms filled with dusty books and desks. The place looked very old and unused, but fires were still lit, so someone had to be there, watching over the castle. Someone had to allow them entry inside. They explored the immediate area of the darkened room, finding a stairway at the end that led up to the second floor, which in turn led up to the third and a fourth, spiraling and extending all the way up to the top of the tower, where a large, red, stained glass skylight allowed the moon to glow through it, like a massive eyeball at the top of the tower, peering down into the interior of this evil place.
We need to find a way out,
Merideth said. Yeah, let's find Frank first, and then focus on getting out of here, Joey replied.
We need to leave, now. Frank can find his own way out,
Merideth said, completely terrified, looking through every open passage for a hint of escape.
There's a light in there,
she said.
I think it's a way out,
she added, before bolting through an open doorway into one of the adjoining rooms. Wait, Merideth, Joey said. Don't go in there, Judah added, but it was too late. A scream rang out from the room she had entered, and the others ran in to find her pinned to the wall beneath a large open hole in the ceiling, revealing the night sky above. The wall was like a bookcase, but not a bookcase. Her arm was bent around to the side of the shelf, where it was held against the stone wall by a hand made of rock that extended outward from the wall's surface, Her other arm appeared as if it were being devoured by an open book, pages ravenously gnawing away at her flesh as it consumed her arm up to the elbow, worded pages forming teeth in several rows as the mouth sucked her flesh inward, off the bone. Her legs and torso were also pulled inward toward the wall, stretching her skin in places as if she was being absorbed into the very building, and the rest of them were helpless, having to watch their friend be devoured by the very castle in which they stood, until there was nothing more of her, not even a drop of blood or a shred of clothing. No trace of her, as if she never existed at all. Anne screamed in fright, and everyone else just stood there, slack-jawed, in complete shock and fear. They all had the same thought, that they were all going to die in that place. But things were just getting started. When everything had settled down, the bookshelf that had devoured the girl simply returned to its normal form of a harmless bookshelf, a single open tome sitting upon it. Then, the pages flipped along as if they were trying to tell them something very important. The book flipped to its title page, which they were able to read from a safe distance. Skullomance was the title, written in calligraphy lettering. Skullomance? What's that?
I think that's this place. I think it's where we are.
Isaac said. Why do you think that? Edward asked.
Well, I studied European folklore amongst other things, and that was one of the things I learned about. Skullomance, a great school of black magic that's believed to be somewhere in Transylvania. They say it's ruled over by the devil himself.
But we're nowhere near Transylvania.
Well, they also say it isn't always there. Like, it just appears out of nowhere, and then, without explanation, it's gone. Maybe it was just first discovered there, but it kind of appears at random wherever it, or its master, wants to.
That doesn't make any sense.
Giant castles appearing out of nowhere and crushing half a forest beneath them doesn't make sense. Walls eating people doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. Despite how logical it may be, it's the most logical answer I have.
It was then that a man's scream rang out from somewhere in the castle. All of them immediately knew it was the scream of their friend Frank, who was somewhere else, higher up. His scream emanated from the tower at the center of the building, far off and echoing downward to pierce the silence. The remaining 5 of them ran through the castle and up the stairs, attempting to find the source of the scream. And it was at this time that they were separated, all of them scattering throughout the castle in an attempt to find their friend or flee the area. Joey found himself in a small bedroom on the 2nd floor. It was beautiful and comfy, despite the darkness of everything around it. He turned to once again return to the entryway, but something caught his eye, and he turned back to find the glow of an apparition of a woman in a Victorian-era dress, sitting at the edge of the bed, looking at him with hollow, black eyes sunken into nothingness. He couldn't say a word. He was so terrified by what he had witnessed. He simply backed out of the room and closed the door in front of him, never taking his eyes off of the woman, who also never took her eyes, or lack thereof, off of him. He closed the door and continued to back away, looking elsewhere for his friends and unable to shake what he had seen. Isaac was able to locate an observation room of sorts that overlooked what appeared to be some kind of operating room with a metal operating table and various medical instruments upon a small cart. he peered down into the room, over the observation balcony, to find a group of people standing there, motionless. He was going to say something to them when he noticed that there was something wrong about them. They weren't exactly human. They were shaped like people, but they were more like humanoid creatures that were an amalgamation of various parts of people and animals sewn together, like some kind of mad science experiment. Some of them had claws, some of them had hooves or horns, some of them consisted of parts of skin tones of mixed races, while others were purely parts of one color. About a half dozen of them, just standing there, breathing, but not moving. Isaac slowly backed away from the balcony's edge and creeped his way back out the door, praying that those things would never find him, and that he could someday forget what he had seen. Anne, however, found something she would not be able to forget. She screamed, allowing the remainder of the group to find her. Upon the floor at the base of some of the steps was what appeared to be a body. It had no head, no hands, and no feet, but it was clearly a human body. A human body that was also devoid of one more feature: skin. The bloody corpse was completely skinned down to the muscle and bone beneath, and it lay in a pool of fresh blood upon the floor. A trail of some viscous, gooey substance was also evident, laying across the floor from the body to the stairs, and on up to what appeared to be a black throne of odd angles and structure. It appeared as if it would be very uncomfortable for whoever sat in it, with angles jutting outward unnaturally, unless that one that used it was not of a humanoid origin or shape. At the foot of the blackened throne lay what appeared to be a golden rope of silk, bunched up on the floor. It was then that the group of them were startled by a familiar voice.
"Did you guys hear that screaming?"
The man's voice said, as its source entered the light, revealing himself to be Frank. "Frank," Judah said. "Are you all right? We heard you screaming," he said.
Yeah, I'm fine. And that wasn't me you heard,"
Frank replied, a bit confused by what was happening.
"Then it must have been him,"
Isaac said, pointing to the corpse upon the floor.
"Whoa, who's that?"
Frank asked, a bit shocked by what he saw.
We don't know,"
Anne said, shakily. We need to get out of here," Judah said, trying to usher everyone along.
"Wait, what about Merideth?"
She's dead,"
Anne replied, looking downward.
"What? No, she's not. I just talked to her upstairs. But she ran off after she heard you screaming in here."
What? What are you talking about? That's impossible. We all just watched her die downstairs.
"No, I'm telling you, she's upstairs. Come on, I'll show you,"
Frank said, and without any further discussion, he slipped out the door, forcing the rest of the group to follow him.
"Wait! Don't go out there!"
Isaac said, attempting to stop the group, but none of them listened. Frank led the group of them upstairs and into a large room filled with riches and jewels beyond imagination. Everything in the room glistened with immense beauty. Things behind glass cases and fastened to walls. Suits of ornate armor and beautiful display weapons. Piles of golden coins, golden bars, and gemstones of all varieties. Joey reached out to grab some riches, but immediately decided against it, having seen what this place could do. He didn't want to attempt to steal anything from this place. He didn't feel like being eaten, or killed, or what have you. And besides, he figured even if he did manage to escape with anything, he would probably be cursed forever in the process. So he put his hands in his pockets and continued on. They followed Frank to the back of the room where several glass displays and jewelry-adorned busts stood, encircling the room. a single ray of light shining down on a bust in the room's center, upon which a small tiara and a blood-red ruby amulet sat. Glistening in the ray of light that shined down from above, both pieces very ornate and stunning.
He was right here.
Frank said, before
Meredith!
yelling out her name and getting no reply. Everyone else was sure that she was dead, but called out for her nonetheless. But they got silence as a reply. Nothing. As everyone looked around the room, Edward's eye was captured by the pendant upon the bust in the center of the room. He claimed something about it called out to him, and he needed to have it. Isaac turned to see Edward reach out and grasp the stone around the bust in the core of the area. Edward stood there, slack-jawed, drool beginning to pool and spill out over his lip as his skin began to sizzle and smoke from the palm of his hand where he held the amulet.
Edward!
Isaac yelled with no reply.
Edward!
He yelled louder as he pushed his hand away from the necklace.
Are you all right?
Anne asked. Edward simply looked at his hand, still drooling a bit, then looking back up at Anne and Isaac. Then he looked all around the room, kinda confused, before telling a remarkable story in great detail. Every mind-bending, insane, rambling detail, as well as he could comprehend it anyway. When he touched the amulet, he was transported to a room that looked the same as the one that they were in, but none of the rest of them were there, and everything was bathed in a kind of purple light, both inside the room and outside, where he eventually went to look for the rest of the group. The room didn't open up to the castle, but instead to some far-off place, some weird world with a purple-colored sky, with black clouds that swirled around overhead. But beneath him, where the castle should have been, was nothing but an empty void with various colors and patterns all moving about, as if he were looking into the vastness of space, branching out infinitely and showing him the universe in its entirety forever and ever, all together at once. Stepping stones appeared, allowing him to move forward, floating through the void. He passed by what he originally thought was a large planet in the endless expanse of space. But it soon changed, rumbling and moving, writhing and twisting. It breathed in galaxies, as if consuming the entirety of space and time all around it. A billion mouths, like teeth, filled black holes, sucking the universe inward. Eyes without reason, blinking all about its entire form. Twisting tongues, whispering unknown words of unpleasant sounds no living being was capable of repeating. It consisted of massive tentacles and appendages, all twisting and coiling about, all of them covered by giant, festering pustules, like zits and blisters, across its surface, each of them a cocoon, growing organisms of immense power within them, each of them disgusting and putrid beings of their own, waiting to be born, to devour the universe, like the parent being. Some of them popping with great force, sending beasts spiraling off in every direction, speeding through the endless void to some unknown destination, while others remained, incubating inside for their turn across unknown millennia. Edward then found himself in a different place, a world of darkness, of caves dripping with water and teeming with scurrying bits of life and various unknown creatures. He moved through the caves until he found himself in a giant underground cavern where fungus appeared to glow with a dull green color, illuminating the walls of a massive opening. He looked down into the valley of the cave and found that there was something there. A massive being covered in various forms of fungus and moss, teeming with life of all varieties across the giant, heaving life form that appeared to pulsate upon the cavern floor, where it coned upward to touch the ceiling, connecting it and fusing with it at the cellular level. The pulsating mass was covered with eyes, much like the vast beast that he had seen previously, eyes that swirled about and appeared to swell and pop, allowing for the viscous mess to spill out, a mess that was filled with multicellular life and bacterium, evolving and dying out at a rapid rate into new species, both known and unknown, most being absorbed back into the parent being, while some managed to scurry away, creating new species deep beneath the crust of the planet. This great beast twisted and writhed about, forming amorphous arms made of various life forms that birthed from its own being, before coiling tentacles of life would splash down into the core to be reabsorbed and born anew, like a festering mass of disgusting life. This was then followed by the image of a great humanoid being covered with arms, legs, claws, wings, and other various crustacean or insectoid pieces. Its head appeared to be very squid-like, with eyes like that of a cat, diamond-shaped pupils inside golden iris that raged with an aura of malice and hatred. He was bound to a black rock by red-hot chains, a giant stone that sat in the center of a lake of everlasting fire, a prisoner of sorts. He saw a vast city in a colorful world, a city upon which grew a massive thing like fungal blooms across the surface of the buildings, all of them like eyes rolling and blinking, connecting together, spheres of all sizes connecting to form a central spire that sprouted upward to the night sky to meet a single large sphere at its end, a sphere like a massive bubble the size of the moon. Yet this moon was formed of shifting colors, like a giant soap bubble in the sky. However, it was much more solid than the thin veil of a bubble. It was more like the swirling darkness and unnatural or unknown colors that the human eye could not possibly normally see. A thing that his mind could not possibly comprehend. A being of endless knowledge and wisdom. He could not know the infinite complexity of it, but he could feel it. Dozens more beasts still, all of them unnatural and impossible, things that should not exist, things that should not be, things that his mind could not comprehend, all passing him by, one after another, breaking him, destroying his being down to an atomic level, returning him to dust, basic chemicals, the most minute pieces of the universe, before once again reforming him piece by piece in his complete being once again, only to break him down into nothingness once more, repeating the process over and over again for what felt like an eternity to him. Then he woke up, and he was before them once again, after a few million lifetimes of endless chaos. He was back in the castle where it all started, and despite the madness within him that was driven into his core, he wanted to go back there. He needed to go back there. Then, just as he started his story of insanity, he fell quiet once again, a puddle of drool forming on his lower lip once more as he drifted off, staring into nothing. "I don't think he's all right," Joey said, concerned for his friend. It was at that time that Edward's arm shot up with an outstretched finger, pointing to the doorway of the room before walking out of it and turning to them to point toward a doorway on the balcony opposite of them. The door was large, a wooden one that was very similar to the one they had entered through, but this one was on the 3rd floor. "You don't suppose that's..." Judah began. "No, it couldn't be," Joey replied. Judah then approached the door, moving along the banister of the balcony that overlooked the floors beneath. He moved to the familiar door with great caution. In this place, anything was possible. He reached out and gripped the metal handle before swinging the door open. And outside of the 3rd floor of the castle was the courtyard where they had entered, just the same as it was when they had first seen it. It's the way out," Judah said happily.
We can't leave yet. What about Merideth?
Frank asked. "She's dead, Frank. We watched her die. I don't know who you saw, but it wasn't Merideth," Joey replied.
No, she's alive. I spoke with her.
"No, she's dead. We all saw it."
But we can't leave.
We have to. Come on. Let's go.
But you can't leave. You only just got here.
What? What do you mean?
Anne asked, a bit weirded out by the change in Frank's demeanor.
You can't leave. Not yet. Not ever.
Frank said, a smile creeping across his face. "What? What the hell's going on, Frank?" Joey asked.
I guess I should tell you that I'm not exactly who you think I am.
What are you talking about, Frank?
I'm not Frank. Well, not exactly. Frank is in here, and I look like him. But I am not him. Not exactly. I don't know what his intent with you all was, but I think you should know. This place only appears to those with evil intentions. It is only the sinister who hear its call. The music of madness. It sensed him and opened itself up. So he must have had a great darkness in his heart, or a wicked hunger he wished to satiate.
Who are you then? Judah said, now standing by the open door, propping it open with his body. It was at this time that the thing's skin suit tore away in places, revealing a mass of writhing tentacles beneath Frank's torso as his skin tore and split, falling away to the floor. His mouth spread open wide, skin splitting at the corners of his grin to reveal an elongated head covered with a black, membranous skin that stretched across a featureless face of pure shadow and hatred, glistening like the endless night sky with a wet face, a countenance devoid of all features, only blackness of a cold abyss. This thing was not the devil, at least not in any known sense of the word. This thing was different. It felt more ancient and more sinister somehow. The thing's tentacles flailed about, grasping at whatever they could, and it was in this chaos that Joey was trapped, thrown about like a rag doll by the writhing appendages. Isaac somehow managed to free Joey from the monster's grasp, which allowed the group of them to slip around the nameless king that wore their friend's skin. The remainder of them quickly fled out the door and ran as fast as they could, not looking back. The sound of sloshing mud could be heard behind them, and they knew the beast was hot on their trail. They swiftly piled into the rear car, where they finally looked out the back toward the castle. But instead of seeing the black, massive spires of darkness and malice of the dark school of Scholomans, they saw nothing. Nothing but the night sky and the forest around them, a forest that now had a large area of uprooted and broken trees. The group of them made it about a mile down the road before they found something that Edward had brought along. The amulet. The amulet that had caused his madness. An endless madness that he would be stricken with for the rest of his days. The very instrument of the chaos that existed within his mind. They decided that each of them would continue on with whatever family legacies they could. They would continue investing in stocks and making riches in order to pool their funds together build a place to hide this thing from the world. They had seen what it had done to their friend, and they knew where it came from. They were afraid that it could bring that back. They were afraid of what would happen if someone else got a hold of it, or if it fell into the wrong hands. So, they created an organization that would work in secret to study and contain this amulet, and whatever other paranormal things that they would come across in their future studies. They wanted to protect the people from things that would destroy the very fabric of their existence, so they created the Initiative for the Containment and Active Research of Unnatural Specimens, ICARUS. The director also mentioned a few more things, like some other estimated locations of Scalamans throughout time. Some of them completely silent, while others creating massive explosions or registering as earthquakes on magnitude scales. From the Tunguska event of 1908 Russia to 2018 on the Olympic Peninsula in the northwest Washington state of the United States. We can only estimate where this place has been, because it never appears in the same place twice. But it is believed that one day, the owner of the amulet will seek to have it returned to him. And we fear there is little that we could do to stop him if he were to ever try.
Well, now we know where they came from. We just need to know where they're going. Straight to hell, most likely. But if you want more of the red stuff, stop by again next weekend. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.
Social media can be very unpredictable, especially regarding horror content. If this content gets removed, all new content will be simultaneously presented on various websites provided in the description to this video. Make sure to follow me in other digital spaces so that you never miss out on the terror. Also, if you like this video, make sure to leave a comment and hit the like button. It helps the channel a lot. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy what's here, consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you never miss an upload. Writing is a dream of mine, and it's all of you that make that dream come true.